The Cold War was many things, but was unarguably a conflict of rival ideologies, with various degrees of capitalism on one side facing off against various degrees and forms of socialism on the other. Despite the conflict lasting for almost 50 years, there were relatively few direct ideological debates between the leaders of the two superpowers, which is what made a 1959 impromptu discussion between Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev and US Vice President Richard Nixon all the more notable. I'm your host David, and today we're going to look at the 1959 kitchen debate, a series of exchanges between the two men as they toured the American National Exhibition in Moscow. This is the Cold War. By the late 1950s, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union had reached a new phase. The arms race and the space race had already defined the era, but another competition was taking shape, a contest over which system could provide a better standard of living for its people. As one historian has put it, quote, "The Cold War was not only about bombs and spies, it was also about washing machines, supermarkets, and suburban homes." In the Soviet Union, Nikita Khrushchev was determined to prove that communism was not only equal to capitalism, but superior. He famously declared that the Soviet Union would soon surpass the United States in living standards. "In another 7 years, we will be on the same level as America. When we catch up with you, while passing by, we will wave to you." Meanwhile, in the United States, leaders sought to highlight the advantages of capitalism through consumer culture. As part of a cultural exchange agreement, the US planned a grand exhibition in Moscow in 1959, a showcase of American life filled with technological wonders, modern conveniences, and promises of abundance. Ambassador Llewellyn Thompson advised that the exhibit should, quote, "make the people dissatisfied with the share of the Russian pie which they now receive." At the heart of this exhibition was a model American home, complete with a fully furnished kitchen equipped with the latest appliances. This kitchen, painted bright yellow and designed for the ideal American housewife, would become the unlikely setting for one of the most famous debates of the Cold War. On July 24, 1959, Richard Nixon and Nikita Khrushchev toured the exhibition together. When they entered the model home's kitchen, their conversation quickly turned into a debate over whose system, capitalism or communism, offered the better way of life. "I want to show you this kitchen. It is like those in our houses in California," Nixon began, pointing to the latest household appliances. Khrushchev was unimpressed. "We have such things." Nixon countered, "This is our newest model. In America, we like to make life easier for women." Khrushchev shot back, "Your capitalistic attitude towards women does not occur under communism." Nixon then highlighted the affordability of American homes. "This house can be bought for $14,000, and most American veterans from World War II can buy a home in the bracket of $10,000 to $15,000. He explained that even a steel worker earning $3 an hour could afford it with a monthly payment of about $100. Khrushchev was skeptical. "Your American houses are built to last only 20 years, so builders could sell new houses at the end. We build firmly. We build for our children and grandchildren." Nixon defended the American system. "After 20 years, many Americans want a new house or a new kitchen. The American system is designed to take advantage of new inventions and new techniques." Khrushchev dismissed this. "Some things never get out of date. Houses, for instance." The discussion broadened into a defense of each country's economic approach. Nixon stressed, "Diversity, the right to choose, the fact that we have 1,000 builders building 1,000 different houses is the most important thing. We don't have one decision made at the top by one government official." Khrushchev responded, "On politics, we will never agree with you." Confident in the future of communism, Khrushchev declared, "We haven't quite reached 42 years, and in another 7 years, we'll be at the level of America, and after that, we'll go farther. As we pass you by, we'll wave hi to you, and then if you want, we'll stop and say, please come along behind us." The debate, later dubbed the kitchen debate, was broadcast in both countries, providing a rare, unscripted glimpse into the contrasting worldviews of their leaders. What had begun as a tour of a model home became a defining moment in Cold War propaganda. The kitchen debate was not just a conversation, it was a performance. With journalists, photographers, and television cameras capturing every moment, both the United States and the Soviet Union quickly moved to shape the narratives in their favor. For Nixon, the debate was a public relations victory. American media framed his confident engagement with Khrushchev as a moment of Cold War strength. Footage of the debate was broadcast on American television, reinforcing Nixon's image as a statesman who could stand up to Soviet leadership. The New York Times declared it, quote, the most important confrontation of the Cold War, while Nixon's supporters pointed to it as proof of American superiority in both lifestyle and diplomacy. In the Soviet Union, the reaction was more controlled. State media presented Khrushchev as dominant, portraying him as the leader who would put Nixon in his place. Pravda, the official Soviet newspaper, although infamous for not always living up to its namesake, dismissed the American kitchen as a capitalist gimmick meant to distract from what truly mattered: industrial strength and collective well-being. As Khrushchev himself put it, "Don't you have a machine that puts food in your mouth?" A remark meant to mock what he saw as the excess of American consumerism. Yet, beyond the official narratives, the impact of the debate was more complicated. More than 2 million Soviet citizens attended the American National Exhibition, walking through the model home, flipping through Sears catalogs, and sampling Pepsi Cola for the first time. While some dismissed the exhibit as propaganda, others found themselves fascinated by the everyday conveniences on display. The United States had long used consumer culture as a Cold War propaganda tool, particularly in post-war Europe. Historian Greg Castillo described this strategy as Operation Abundance, designed to showcase capitalism's ability to provide material wealth in contrast to Soviet austerity. The kitchen debate was simply the most famous example of this approach. For US officials, the debate was a psychological victory. A CIA report later described the exhibition as probably the most productive single psychological warfare effort ever launched by the US in any communist country. The footage of Nixon debating Khrushchev circulated widely, reinforcing the message that American prosperity was unmatched. But Soviet leadership was also aware of the power of consumerism. Khrushchev had already initiated policies to improve Soviet living standards, recognizing that citizens wanted more than just industrial achievements. While he mocked the American kitchen, he also understood that Soviet families desired modern appliances, comfortable housing, and an improved quality of life. The kitchen debate was more than a war of words. It was a symbolic clash of economic and social ideologies, fought through the language of consumer goods. It reinforced how the Cold War was not just a competition over nuclear weapons and military alliances, but also over refrigerators, washing machines, and suburban homes. For the United States, material abundance was not just about quality of life, it was a form of psychological warfare. The belief was simple: if people in the Eastern Bloc saw what capitalism had to offer, they might begin to question their own system. The exhibition in Moscow was designed to highlight this contrast. The model home was filled with color televisions, dishwashers, and the latest kitchen gadgets, all meant to impress Soviet visitors. More than 2 million Soviets toured the exhibition, many experiencing these products for the first time. As Greg Castillo noted, consumer culture became a Cold War weapon, part of a strategy that had already been deployed in post-war Europe through initiatives like the Marshall Plan. But at the same time, Soviet leaders pushed back against this narrative. Khrushchev argued that the capitalist focused on individual wealth created inequality, while the Soviet model ensured fairness for all. "We build firmly, we build for our children and grandchildren," he declared. Soviet propaganda emphasized that consumer goods should be a collective benefit, not a luxury for the few. Yet Soviet citizens were still intrigued. The sight of modern, well-stocked kitchens challenged official Soviet rhetoric about American economic struggles. The reality was that while Soviet industry had excelled in space exploration and heavy manufacturing, it lagged in consumer production. Seeing American goods firsthand planted doubts about the narrative of Soviet superiority. Though neither leader could claim a definitive victory, one thing was clear: the Cold War was being fought not just in military arsenals and diplomatic meetings, but in kitchens, living rooms, and department stores. The kitchen debate also exposed stark differences in how each country viewed gender roles. The American model kitchen symbolized the idealized role of women as homemakers, supported by labor-saving devices. Nixon argued that modern appliances were designed to make life more easy for our housewives. The implication was clear: American prosperity was not just about wealth, but about ensuring a comfortable domestic life. Khrushchev, however, rejected this vision. Your capitalistic attitude towards women does not occur under communism, he asserted, emphasizing that Soviet women worked outside the home in factories and farms. The Soviet model promoted gender equality in the workforce, though in practice, Soviet women still bore significant domestic responsibilities without the conveniences that Nixon was showcasing. As historian Elaine Tyler May observed, both superpowers used domestic life to reinforce their ideological agendas. In America, the nuclear family was framed as a stabilizing force against communism, while in the Soviet Union, the ability to provide housing and employment was proof of socialism's success. The kitchen debate became a defining moment in Cold War history, shaping the way both the United States and the Soviet Union framed their economic and ideological competition in the years that followed. For Richard Nixon, the debate was a political triumph. The American media celebrated his performance, portraying him as a tough Cold Warrior who had stood up to Khrushchev with confidence and conviction. His willingness to challenge the Soviet leader in a public forum was seen as a sign of strength, and footage of the debate was widely broadcast in the United States. Nixon himself capitalized on the moment. He later cited the kitchen debate during his 1960 presidential campaign, using it as evidence of his experience in foreign policy and his ability to handle Soviet aggression. While he ultimately lost to John F. Kennedy, the debate cemented his reputation as a formidable political figure. When he ran for president again in 1968, his experience from Moscow remained part of his Cold War credentials. Though the debate was framed as an ideological clash, it also reflected a moment of diplomatic engagement between the two superpowers. The US and the Soviet Union had agreed to cultural exchanges in the late 1950s, and the American National Exhibition in Moscow was part of this broader effort. In return, the Soviet Union held its own exhibition in New York, showcasing its own industrial and scientific achievements. While the kitchen debate did not lead to immediate policy changes, it was a precursor to later Cold War diplomacy. The televised exchange demonstrated that both sides were willing to engage in direct, albeit heated, discussions about their differences. In many ways, it foreshadowed later moments of US-Soviet dialogue, such as the arms control negotiations of the 1970s. Yet, tensions between the two nations remained high. Just 2 years after the debate, the Berlin Wall was built, and in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. The ideological divide between the US and the Soviet Union continued to define global politics for decades, even into the present day. In the end, the kitchen debate was less about determining a winner and more about highlighting the ways in which the Cold War was fought in everyday spaces. Even today, the debate remains relevant as a case study in how nations use culture, economics, and technology to assert their ideological dominance. The Cold War may be over, but the fundamental questions raised in that Moscow kitchen, questions about economic systems, quality of life, and the role of consumerism in shaping political power, continue to shape global politics today. We hope you've enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss our future work, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and have pressed the bell button before it begins an impromptu set of exchanges with another bell button from a rival channel. Do we even have rival channels? Please consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thecoldwar or through YouTube membership. We can be reached via email at thecoldwarchannel@gmail.com. This is the Cold War Channel, and as we think about the Cold War, please remember that history is shades of gray and rarely black and white.